It was the failed debt recovery scheme that cost more than $1 billion and led to many years of stress for victims. Now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced a royal commission into Robodebt. The coalition claims the inquiry is a witch hunt, but it's been welcomed by those affected by it. Joining me live is NDIS and Government Services Minister Bill Shorten. Good to see you again, Minister. From our chat that we had yesterday, we've since heard from Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, who called the Royal Commission into Robodebt as a political witch hunt, accusing the Prime Minister of attempting to get square with Scott Morrison. What's your reaction to that?
Peter Dutton needs to let go of the emotional baggage of defending the previous government's mistakes. I would say to Mr Dutton and to any coalition politicians who may be called to give evidence, if you've done nothing wrong, if you've got nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to worry about. But let's go back to what Robodebt was really about, Kenny. It was the Commonwealth Government of Australia, under the previous government, who raised nearly $2 billion in unlawful debts against nearly 500,000 Aussie citizens, people on the breadline, people needing the safety net, and they were stigmatised as welfare cheats and frauds, and it turns out the only cheats were the government using illegal powers to set debt collectors on some of our most vulnerable fellow citizens.
The opposition leader also said that you should be the first witness because you set up Robodebt and set the parameters of the Robodebt scheme when Labor was last in government. What do you say to that? Are you expecting to potentially be called to the Royal Commission?
I think Mr Dutton is just gone to another planet when he's talking that sort of stuff, blaming Labor. Robodebt was set up, the online compliance system, which was the subject of the class action and the subject of the Royal Commission, was established in July 2015 when Mr Morrison was then the Social Services Minister. Mr Dutton's just trying to blame everyone else. I think what he really needs to do here is he needs to answer some questions himself. Does he believe that the Robodebt scheme, of which he was a cabinet member, which established it, does he believe that it was unlawful for 4.5 years? And being unlawful, which the court has said, the Commonwealth lawyers finally conceded, courtesy of a class action and the action of the Victorian Legal Aid Commission, does he concede that there were warning signs, complaints that were ignored by his cabinet? I mean, really, the man doesn't have a leg to stand on, and it's not about him. He shouldn't make it about him. But hundreds of thousands of our fellow citizens were subject to a computer algorithm which, once it punched out a number, then individual citizens had to fight back and defend their own name. The previous government reversed the onus of proof from the government to prove the debt existed to the citizen proving the debt didn't exist. They took out the human oversight. They relied on a faulty algorithm to just for one point of evidence to then conduct a hunt against its own citizens.
We've got the Robodebt Royal Commission, the promised COVID pandemic Royal Commission, the review into Scott Morrison's secret ministerial portfolios. The opposition leader thinks that your government is too focused on looking backwards than forwards, and that they're claiming you should be more focused on things like cost of living. Is that fair criticism?
No, it's not. I'm principally interested in the Robodebt Royal Commission. We announced this 2 years ago. We have a mandate. We took it to the people of Australia. We in fact announced it before the Eden-Monaro by-election and then won that by-election. Our policy on the Robodebt Royal Commission has been tested and taken to the people of Australia. I think it is important. This is a government who wants to pretend that Robodebt never happened. And the problem is that whilst through the class action which I helped organise, we were successful in getting the money back for the people who were unlawfully robbed by their own government, but the government has never explained at all in 6-7 years who came up with the scheme, who bothered to check whether or not it was lawful. Did they know it was unlawful and just ignored it, or were they just reckless and ignored the lack of legal power to do what they were doing? And when there were thousands of complaints, court decisions in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, legal experts, the opposition, including myself, the government mocked us, they laughed at everyone, they said, we're making it up, the scheme was fine. If we don't know what went wrong then how do we know we won't repeat that mistake again? And for the record, this is a government, the Albanese government, can do more than one thing at a time. We can get the shameful chapter of public administration, which was Robodebt, and find out what went wrong, and we can tackle cost of living, climate change and all the other, and making sure that everyone has a job and all the other things that Australians expect us to do.
Minister, just on another topic, we just heard from Treasurer Jim Chalmers, who was talking up the Job Summit, which is next week. A big issue leading up to the Job Summit has been the push from unions to have multi-employer enterprise bargaining agreements across sectors in order to attempt to fix stagnant wages. Both the Treasurer and the Prime Minister say current enterprise bargaining is broken, but stop short of saying they'd support the unions in this. Well, now Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke says he's very open to the idea, which is opposed by business groups. Does that signal that perhaps your government is softening on the idea of this?
What it signals is a recognition that we have low wages growth in this country. That's a disaster, especially when the previous government's bequeathed us massive debt, contributing to some of our inflation we're experiencing along with international factors. Or to put plainly, Kenny, working people in this country are going backwards because of low wages. Now, once upon a time, one of the ways to get a wage rise was through enterprise bargaining. But unfortunately, the previous government, through its legal changes, made it harder for enterprise bargaining to occur, and the consequence of that has been slower wages growth. So the government has said that all ideas are on the table. That doesn't mean that they endorse it, but it doesn't mean that merely because a union has an idea, the government's going to just put their hands over their ears and not listen. Ideas need to be heard, and I also understand that not all business groups are automatically opposed to this idea.
Yeah, do you think that though multi-employer bargaining agreements would take us back to the 1960s as suggested by the opposition leader Peter Dutton?
Mr Dutton's having a shocker of a week. He's against everything. No, of course it won't take us back to the 1960s. In the 1960s, 30 to 35% of Australians just worked in manufacturing and nearly everyone was in a union. The reality is that our economy is much more diversified. Workplaces are much more diversified in terms of their size. A lot of people work in smaller businesses. We have nearly 30% of our workforce in casual or contract employment, whereas in the 1960s nearly everyone was in permanent employment. The economic circumstances and the nature of our economy are radically different from the 1960s. Mr Dutton should stop reading our little make-believe horror stories and trying to scare people and get on the bus to be constructive. I mean, he didn't even want to come to the Jobs Summit, or now he's bagging ideas that will be discussed at it. He can't have it both ways. Listen, I don't want to give Mr Dutton a lot of advice. He's got his own path to make. But I've been opposition leader. One thing you can't do is just oppose everything the government does. And unfortunately, I think Mr Dutton's falling for the trap of being negative about anything that the government does.
Bill Shorten, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Super.